Look, I know I'm just a drop in the ocean, but in the midst of all this madness, I am inspired to speak up and say something that I don't hear anyone else saying, and I think is the most important thing that all of us collectively can do, regardless of where you are in the political spectrum, in order to make a more healthy, harmonious world, in order to achieve any of the other goals that we want to achieve. And I bet that when I finish describing all of this, that you're going to agree we have to address this first if we want to tackle any of the other things we care about. So the election is over and we all wake up and discover that we are just as divided, that there is just as much animosity, there is just as much friction as there was before, that the basic underlying problem that got us here still remains. And both sides look to each other and go, how could you possibly do this? How could you believe this? How could you believe what you believe? How could you not realize that there are lives at stake? How could you not realize that freedom is at stake? How could you not realize all that we are risking? Do you not know what you are doing? How could you be so misled? Let's be honest. I mean, the reason that you believe, that I believe, the things that I believe, the stories I've been told, is because someone told them to me and I trusted that person and I believed them, and they trusted some person that told them something, or something they read and they believed that, and the person who did that was told by someone else. It's a giant house of cards of belief. And the reality is that most of us, and that includes like almost everybody, most of us, we don't have the time or even opportunity to test all those beliefs. We believe that stuff because that's what we're exposed to. And no matter how broad or wide your life has been in the scale of the human experience, it's just a fragment of what you could know about reality, about the nature of this existence. And so each of us is basically believing in some version of reality that has come to us through the information that we've been exposed to. And whether or not that is actually anchored in actual reality, in the truth of what's going on out there, well, that's another matter entirely. We just believe. We just believe. We just believe. How could you not realize that there are lives at stake? How could you not realize that freedom is at stake? How could you not realize all that we are risking? Do you not know what you are doing? How could you be so misled? This question underlies everything, and we look to each other with frustration, with fear, and we say, how can this be? And the answer is, we live in entirely different perceptual worlds. We are operating from entirely different versions of reality. And that is the issue that we must resolve in order to move forward. So let us pause for a moment of clarity. Because when we say reality, we don't mean reality, we mean our interpretations of reality. The stories we tell is not the thing itself, it's how we're interpreting that reality. And we're interpreting it very differently. And it matters because our ability to tell stories is what has given humanity, for better or worse, all the power that we have. It is our ability to tell a story that enables us to coordinate around a common goal. Whether that's the story of America, or the story of democracy, or the story of being able to send a rocket to the moon. It's our stories that help us align. And so if we can't tell a common story, if we can't get around a common story, we can't get together at all. It's very hard, if not impossible, to think and believe something that you don't even know about. And the reality is that we don't know about most of it. Most of us, one way or another, no matter how broad and wide your life is, you've only lived inside a little tiny version of all that's possible. And so again, what we choose to believe and think really comes down to what we're exposed to. And that is the crux of the issue. That is the reason why we live in different perceptual worlds, because we are being divided by different streams of information. Divide and conquer, divide and conquer, divide and conquer. The reason that that strategy is as old as human civilization is because it works. If you can keep people from being able to tell a story that they can organize themselves around, if you can have them divided by their beliefs, they're not able to work together to make change. It all depends on our ability to align around a common story. We have to find a way to share common points of reference about the nature of reality and how we're going to interpret it. That is our great challenge. We only have a few institutions designed to actually test. Do we know it to be true? Scientists, they struggle with the exact same thing that the rest of us do, believing mostly stuff that other people told them. But in their one little place where they focus, the one little thing that they study, in that one place, they're not just believing, they're testing it, and they're using other scientists to help them test it as well. That one way of knowing, that way of testing reality, sometimes reproduced in journalism, that is the anchor that produced the modern world. That ability to actually get a grasp on what is actually going on from an objective position, regardless of your bias, by testing reality from multiple viewpoints. The rest of us, we just believe. The stories that we are told, the way that that comes to us, is broken. Our information ecology is broken. And if we want to figure out how to work together, we have to solve this problem of our broken information ecology. One of the ways that you can know that the ecology is broken is you will perceive that we are no longer being presented with information that provides room for the possibility of compromise and discussion. Both sides are receiving interpretations of reality that essentially exclude the other side from any kind of reasonable discussion. We look at the versions of reality that are presented to us and we throw our hands up and say, what could I possibly say to that? Because we don't even share a common point of reference in which we could discuss it. So here's a riddle worth pondering. Why is it in a world where we have more access to information and better systems for moving information around than ever before by many magnitudes, why is it in such a world that the information that we are getting is so deeply biased and divisive? The answer to that question is not something that you want to hear. It's triggering when we realize that this is the case. But the answer is that the reason that our information streams are broken, that our information ecology is broken, is because information is already being regulated, or more specifically, speech is already being regulated. It is being censored, and it's not some kind of nefarious conspiracy. It's being censored by the way that the system is set up based upon an economic model that says that speech and money are essentially the same thing. And that if you want to be able to move your speech around, that is a matter of money. This is what the Citizens United case was about. It was about whether or not money is essentially equivalent to speech. And that even when you're working on your social media profiles and you have the opportunity to boost your message, that again, that's the same thing at a very local level, is the connection between your speech and money. Now, the way that this kind of information that we're getting, all this political information, is moving around information about conspiracies and so forth, information about science, information about anything. All of that information is moving in an ecology that depends upon whether or not it makes money. And that's very different than an ecology that's about whether or not it's good for you or whether or not it's true. And that's what's ultimately determining what voices, what pieces of information dominate. Now, there's a lot to understanding how that works. But let's just begin by realizing that what we're actually talking about is speech is already being censored. Speech is already being regulated. And the question of our time, the question that will determine whether or not we are going to be able to coalesce around a common story, comes down to whether or not we will allow this system based on money to regulate speech, or whether we're going to regulate speech based upon some other values and other principles that we all agree on and that we institute as a form of governance. I know, it's triggering, it's uncomfortable, it's worth thinking about. Because if we can't align around a story, we can't collaborate, we can't cooperate, then we can't get anything done. Evidence of this dangerous, broken relationship between money and information is everywhere apparent, but particularly in the fact that our information streams are dominated by stories that make us fearful of each other, that make us outraged, that make us distrust one another, that give us anxiety. All of those things that aren't good for us are good for making money because they keep us watching. That's regulation. That is regulation of information by money. We have to choose something else. So if I may return to where we started this discussion. We just started this discussion recognizing that the problem is deep and it hasn't gone away by any kind of election. And as a matter of fact, it may even be getting worse. And that if we want to achieve the really high ideals, the dreams we all have, if we really care for the things that we say we're fighting for, that all of that depends upon our ability to work together. And our ability to work together depends on our ability to agree on some basic aspects of our interpretation of reality. In other words, our ability to share in a common story again. And if we want to do that, then we have to look and recognize that the stories that we're telling those stories of fear and anxiety because they make money, because they keep us glued to the screen for advertisers, because they make us feel fear and outrage, which we know are profound motivators on a biological level. But I think that we can all agree that the value of a story goes well beyond whether or not it can make a buck. It's not just about how much the story is worth in terms of money. Our stories matter because we use those stories to help us make our way into the future together. And right now, our information ecology excludes stories that tell us how we can work together, that are about common places of agreement, that are about compromise, that are about hope rather than fear. If you care about making a different world, a better world, a world that you dream about, then you have to care about the stories that we tell. And we have to confront the reality that our new technologies have now made it possible to divide and conquer through the regulation of speech based upon the equation of speech with money. And it's already happening. And if we don't address it, that equation is going to continue to divide and fragment all of us from each other. That's my story. I hope you find it valuable. I hope you think about it and improve upon it. And share it wherever it'll be helpful. Share your version of it wherever it'll be helpful. Whatever you care about, think about the connection between what you care about and what I've shared with you today. Are you going to be able to get done what you want to get done if we can't find a way to tell a story together about what we're doing together? Thanks for listening.